Hi everyone. So today I want to continue my Explain Correctly series by talking about the INTJ, the analyst. Now, as you may have already known from my Explained Correctly series, I'm going to be talking about the real INTJ, not the one you may have encountered in some MBTI profiles. When I say INTJ, I'm talking about a type which leads with a judging function, which should be, in the case of the INTJ, introverted thinking rather than introverted intuition, which I would say is actually INTP. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, the real INTJ, not the fake INTJ. So, what is the real INTJ? The analyst. So, the ego block. Again, this is the idea that this is what the type brings to the world. It's what they're strong at. It's what they value as well, and that is introverted thinking and extroverted intuition together. So when that's together, it creates a very theoretical focus for the INTJ. The analyst is analytical. They want to understand how everything fits together, how everything makes sense. They want to come up with certain theories or explanations to make sense of how everything fits together. Everything is connected in some way. There's some kind of underlying structure. And if you can just come up with the perfect theory to make sense of everything, well, wouldn't that be wonderful? So INTJs, like ENTPs, are both focused on that theoretical explorational space. And first of all, we have that dominant function. That is going to be the introverted thinking side. So INTJs are very much about structure. It's not about imposing organization onto their surroundings. They're not very good at that. It's more a sense of an orderliness of their thinking. It's a making sense of how the different facts and propositions around them actually fit together. INTJs are concerned with theoretical elegance, with ideas actually cohering, actually being consistent in some way. Now, they're not necessarily very certain that they've happened across the absolutely true theory, but they are very much a type which is looking at what theories there are and thinking, something doesn't quite make sense here. This could actually there is something underlying to this. There's something which doesn't quite fit. Something's not quite consistent. And so INTJs are often types which like to sort of, not necessarily like, but tend to almost pick apart theories that aren't well enough put together, you could say. And they are very inclined to try to build their own understanding. And it could take quite a while for them to really feel confident in that structure which they put forth. But the point is, they really are attracted to some kind of axiomatic truth, whether it's in mathematics or that's in philosophy, or that's in even in theology. Anything where there's some kind of underlying structure to what's going on, some kind of beautiful system. And so they're very much inclined to form certain models or frameworks or theories to make sense of things. They're existing very much in that theoretical space. And supporting their introverted thinking is extroverted intuition. INTJs are very eclectic and quite open-minded types. They're never quite sure. They're never quite certain of what they think. Instead, it's more of a sort of questioning space. They like to turn things over, look at ideas from different viewpoints and perspectives, and they often just continue to turn ideas over in their heads. They're very academic in that way, writing a discourse where they are questioning this from that angle, questioning it from this angle, slightly doubting, not quite being absolutely sure. It's very much what an INTJ will do. And as they question, they'll start to tease things apart. They'll start to see how it could actually be like this rather than like that. And as they turn it over in a sort of kaleidoscope of their understanding, they're trying to find those natural symmetries, those natural structures which actually make sense. And this makes them very able to form very profound insights into how things really do fit together. Not that they'll necessarily tell you too dogmatically. So, yeah, Now we get to the superego block. And the superego block, this is what's not valued. It is not a place of strength for an INTJ. So this together is a very sort of political and more sort of socially judgmental space. INTJs do not feel comfortable in this, don't feel safe in such an environment where there's a lot of personal judgment going on. For INTJs, they'd much rather do away with the political side to things. They'd rather there just be an environment of reason and an open discussion. They can feel a bit naive in such a space. But first of all, we have the role function for the INTJ, which is essentially introverted feeling. It's they don't like the personally arbitrary and subjective. INTJs are principle oriented rather than personal attitude oriented. So when they can often construct quite a strong morality. There's often the misconception that it's the introverted feeling types that construct a morality. The INTJs will do it as well. They will, but for them, it's about a principle. It's about a structure or a guide or a philosophy which does not bend and contort for each individual. Instead, the rules apply across all the different situations. So they like philosophy. They can be quite religious. They can be quite very philosophical. They may have their principles very much. But when it comes about personal one-to-one relationships, that can almost muddy the waters. It can almost compromise their principles. And that's a hard thing for an INTJ to have to sort of handle. They feel as if they almost are sullying themselves to some degree by forming too close connections to certain people, and then suddenly there's a pressure or an expectation on them to be less than their impartial selves. And INTJs are very much about remaining impartial with their introverted thinking. But they can build and maintain and sustain their relationships. They are aware enough of their personal attitudes to manage this to some degree. What they really struggle to do, what is their main blind spot, you could say, is in their vulnerable function, their extroverted sensation. INTJs are people of reason, not of force. They don't understand the idea of might equals right, and they very much struggle to connect to that way of thinking. So INTJs, as I said, would much rather reason with people. That can leave them very much open to the forcefulness of other people who might seek to gain an advantage or might seek to turn people against them. An INTJ might be quite defenseless in such a situation. And they might not realize when the political reality around them actually is turning against them. INTJs may very much misjudge what kind of political power they might have if they're in a position of leadership, for instance. And they might simply follow what they think their principles are guiding them to do, even if the practical realities, or rather the actual power dynamics, are not in their favor. The idea to an INTJ of actually forcing people to do things, as I said, is very alien to them. They definitely avoid as much as possible the feeling of an authority over them and forcing them to compromise on themselves and their principles and what they are personally about. So they may often stay away from any sort of system which they may think could become oppressive in some kind of way. And they may overly fear that to some degree because they don't easily judge the actual levels of power which could be used against them. In general, these are very gentle souls, and they believe often very strongly in not encouraging any kind of action of aggression. Many can be very pacifistic, often to the extreme. So yes, at the same time, it doesn't mean the INTJs can't say lose their temper. It's just it becomes a sort of more sort of a lashing out of a last defense sort of thing. They don't really understand how to utilize what leverage they actually have in any situation. That can create a certain naivety to the INTJ. Yes, and a certain hypersensitivity, one could say, when other people can be overly sort of boisterous, overly pressing upon them in a sort of forceful way. That can be quite difficult to some INTJs. So now we get to the super id block. This is what is valued and still, though, what is weak. So this is extroverted feeling and introverted sensation. So INTJs are looking for those positive emotions, that environment of inclusivity, of feeling part of things and feeling at home and feeling safe in their present environment. That's very important to an INTJ to have, and not often something they actually end up getting, unfortunately. So, first of all, we have the suggestive function, which is extroverted feeling. So, INTJs, what they really need from other people is to feel that warmth and positivity. If you pay an INTJ a compliment, that can make their day. They're very easy to flatter. They like a sort of supportive, welcoming, positive attention on them. Now, the problem is they're not very good at actually commanding attention. They lack any kind of physical presence because extroverted sensation is their blind spot, but also not so good at actually channeling how they're coming across in a way that is charismatic. They can often come across as a bit dry, a bit sort of, you could say, a bit nerdy or geeky. So a lot of the time, they're not good at actually coming across in a compelling way. So they often don't hold people's attention. And the problem for an INTJ, and sometimes they can have a great deal of anxiety around extroverted feeling. For this reason, they can often come to the fear that people are just going to hate them as soon as they open their mouths. And there's extreme maladaptation in some INTJs who develop more avoidant personality traits. They may hide away from all kinds of social interaction, not because they don't like people. No, INTJs want to feel included. They want to feel part of things, but they fear so much the potential embarrassment of going out there and then actually failing publicly and socially, and being essentially having their fears confirmed to them that they really are hated by everyone. So they're more likely to actually hide away. They need someone else to take the front foot in including them in their social environment. So yes, now we turn to the suggestive. Turn away from the suggestive function to the mobilizing function. We get to introverted sensation. So this is what an INTJ is more likely to want to work on for themselves. INTJs, they can be quite pernickety. As they develop over time, they become more detail aware. And for them, the idea of making their theories and views of the world harmonious, elegant, to have a certain aesthetic. The idea that symmetry is not only mathematically or axiomatically correct, but it's also something which is aesthetically beautiful. That is very much an attraction for many INTJs. The idea that theories can have a beauty to them, that the math can have curves to it, you could say. The sensory experience is important to an INTJ, and that delicate balancing of the sensory harmony around them is very important. Often an INTJ will try to create in their environment that safe space, and unfortunately can get quite stressed when that safe space is disrupted by more forceful actions of others, or just the general chaos of life. That can stress them out. Things in their physical environment being moved, things going wrong in the sort of day-to-day practical, can make them lose their tempers quite a bit. Good example, say King Charles, actually, King Charles the third, and his pen sort of leaking over him, and him getting quite upset about that. That kind of the day-to-day pernickety things can get to them. They need things to be in flow and in harmony. They don't like stress in this environment, because that is what is most likely to, well, stress them out, essentially. What else can I say about the INTJ in this area? So as they grow and develop, so they become more detail aware, they become more also aware of their presentness in the environment around them. They become more connected to nature. They're more able to take their very sort of ivory tower academic ideas and start to connect them up to something which feels holistic. And that's really the point about INTJs, right? They're trying to bring things together. They started by bringing things together conceptually. But what they want to be able to do is to bring things together in an experiential way as well. You can think of INTJs as they become more well developed, they may turn towards something like farming or something like garden arrangements, or things which are more in the physical, but having the structure manifest in the physical and the aesthetic. That's where an INTJ feels most fulfilled, you could say. So yeah, now we turn finally to the id block, and this is where what an INTJ is strong at, but they do not actually value. So for an INTJ, as I said, this is extroverted thinking and introverted intuition. That's what they don't value, because again, they value extroverted intuition, introverted thinking. So what we have here, this is the very sort of skeptical, pragmatic, and task-oriented and just strategic way of thinking. So INTJs are theoretical types. They are not pragmatic types, you could say. So for them, it's about finding the perfect theory to explain everything, and they may take a very long time to find that theory. They're the most judicious of all types, right? They're least likely to make a quick decision. If we go back to extroverted sensation, they often struggle to make any kind of decision, because for them it's about turning it over in their heads. But in the same way, they're not interested in, well, how's this going to meet our goals? Are we on target? That sort of thing. It's not really that concern. Not really a concern for an INTJ. So when we turn to the ignoring function, we have extroverted thinking. So INTJs are not pragmatic types. They're very capable of taking in factual information and knowing how to apply it effectively. They can update their understanding with new facts. They don't tend to like to, and they tend to find that they want to find that factual information which is not necessarily practical, but rather which informs their structures and the theories and frameworks they're trying to build, the models through which they're trying to understand the universe. INTJs are interested in how we go about doing this and accomplishing this. That is, the how question is not important to them. It's a why question is very important to them, but how questions tend to bore them quite a lot. These types are interested in the grand theory or structure of the universe, not necessarily how the five most efficient ways of tying your shoelaces or anything like that, or how you run a company efficiently and make lots of money. INTJs are interested in that sort of thing. They're not how to do. They are, why is it there in the first place, you could say. So this can mean that INTJs can be less willing to look at the data and build their understanding purely based on looking at the data. Instead, they're more likely to think based on first principles. How do things fit together and make sense? How do things work philosophically? They're more naturally towards that rather than the sort of purely empirical or purely commercial way of thinking. Now we have introverted intuition. That's the demonstrative function. So the INTJ does use this a lot more than their extroverted thinking. They're very deep, very analytical, very reflective kinds of people. They think long and hard about things. Where is it going? What is the underlying meaning to it? What is the significance of this way of looking at it as opposed to this? So they are concerned with significance. But however, they don't value this for its own sake. Introverted intuition to an INTJ is fed through their extroverted intuition. So it's a means by which they can be both deep and broad at the same time. It allows them to not only consider ideas in their fullest complexity and finding the most profound, far-reaching insights into these ideas, but they like to then turn it over and consider it from different perspectives. And also, when you have both kinds of intuition working together and no extroverted sensation, this is why INTJs are not good at making decisions. They're the most judicious types, the least decisive types because of that. But yeah, you'll find that when an INTJ is not confident in their physical space, when they aren't in a harmonious environment, they'll fall back on their introverted intuition. They'll go back into their heads. They'll detach from the present situation. They don't want to be detached from the present situation. They want to feel one in their experience. But if they don't have that harmony and that safety, then their mental palace, as opposed to a heaven on earth. The mental palace is where they'll retreat to. Again, not ideal for them, but that's where they can fall back if they need to. Anyway, that's what I had to say about the INTJ. If you want to learn more about the types, please consider purchasing my course. My course, you can find out more in the next video. It should come up just at the end of this video. Yeah, it will teach you all about the different types in depth. And it's not just an explanation from me. I have so many video examples of every single type for you to learn about, so you can get a really thorough understanding. And then you can actually learn how to actually type the different types, meeting people in real life or looking at interviews and other sources in a more academic way. My course offers you all that in a very strong theoretical underpinning to the practice of socionics. So if you want to learn more about that, please email worldsocionics@hotmail.com with an email titled course, and I'll be able to help connect you up to that course so you can start to learn these things to the next level. All right. Thank you for tuning in, everyone. All the best.